This is Radio Caravan, the world news read by Shabnam Modgil. Small groups of pilgrims performed one of the final rites of the Islamic Hajj today as Muslims worldwide mark the start of the Eid al-Adha holiday amid a global pandemic that has impacted nearly every aspect of this year's pilgrimage and celebrations. The last days of the annual pilgrimage to Mecca in Saudi Arabia coincide with the 4-day Eid al-Adha. New hurricane Isaias kept on a path early this morning, expected to take it to the U.S. East Coast by the weekend as it approached the Bahamas, parts of which are still recovering from devastation of last year's Hurricane Dorian. Isaias had a maximum sustained winds of 80 miles per hour this morning and centered about 15 miles south-southwest of Great Inagua Island in the Bahamas, moving northwest at 17 miles per hour. One U.S. Marine has died and 8 service members missing after an amphibious vehicle accident off Southern California. The Marine Expeditionary Force tweeted the news early this morning. The accident occurred during a routine training exercise near the island of San Clemente. 2 pilots are dead after their airplanes collided while battling a 500-acre wildfire in southeastern Nevada. 6 months after sounding its top alarm over the new coronavirus outbreak, the World Health Organization's Emergency Committee meets for a 4th time today to assess the raging pandemic. Comprising around 20 members and advisors, it can propose new recommendations or amend existing ones. At least 17 million people have caught the virus. More than 660,000 have died. Dr. Anthony Fauci, the top U.S. infectious disease expert, will testify today before a coronavirus subcommittee in Congress weeks after President Trump's administration first refused to let him address the panel. His testimony comes at the end of a week when the pandemic's tragic toll on the country has become far clearer. The United States experienced its 150,000th death from the disease, more than any other country. And over 17.3 million people across the globe have been diagnosed with COVID-19. We do have, for the second time this month, the European Union extending its travel ban on Americans as COVID-19 infections continue to rise across the United States. Former Presidents Barack Obama, George W. Bush and Bill Clinton gave speeches yesterday at the funeral for Representative John Lewis, the revered civil rights leader and Democratic congressman from Georgia who died earlier this month. Former President Obama delivered the eulogy and used it in part to level criticism at what he sees as the Trump administration's attacks on peaceful protesters and voting rights amid the coronavirus pandemic. The former president used the funeral yesterday to issue a stark warning that the voting rights and equal opportunity the late civil rights icon championed are threatened heading into the 2020 election. He spoke from the pulpit of the church that Martin Luther King Jr. once led, but he did not mention President Trump by name. At fundraising events where he has pulled in more than $24 million for Joe Biden's campaign in the past 2 months, former President Obama has privately unleashed on President Trump to party donors, bringing up past accusations of Trump's assaulting women and warning of his efforts to push nativist, racist and sexist fears and resentments. President Trump used a White House briefing yesterday to reiterate unfounded concerns about mail-in voting in the forthcoming presidential election. Some Republican senators politely rejected that suggestion to delay the election beyond November 3rd, indicating that the long-shot idea is dead on arrival in Congress. Nearly 2/3 of Americans disapprove of President Trump's handling of 3 major challenges facing the country: the coronavirus pandemic, nationwide unrest over racial inequality, and relations with Russia. The annual meeting of world leaders at the United Nations is going virtual this year for the first time in its 75-year history because of the COVID-19 pandemic, except for the likely personal appearance by President Trump. And Secretary of State Mike Pompeo gave his clearest indication yet that the United States would seek to force UN sanctions on Iran if an arms embargo lapses. Russia and China, 2 of the permanent 5 nations that enjoy veto power on the Security Council, want the UN embargo on selling conventional weapons to Iran to end on the 18th of October as laid out under a 2015 resolution. Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei ruled out negotiations with the United States over Tehran's ballistic missile and nuclear programs today and urged Iranians to resist U.S. pressure. Afghan President Ashraf Ghani ordered the release of 500 Taliban prisoners as part of a new ceasefire that could lead into long-delayed peace talks. Yemen's Houthi rebels freed 6 prominent members of the Baha'i religious minority whose years-long incarceration on charges of espionage and hearsay had drawn worldwide condemnation. And a recent surge of violence in Darfur, the war-scarred region of western Sudan, has deprived more than 14,000 children of medical care. A car bomb exploded at the checkpoint manned by Turkey-backed Syrian opposition fighters in northeastern Syria, killing and wounding several. And a rare opportunity to calm the troubled waters of the eastern Mediterranean arose this week, with Turkey putting on hold a controversial seismic survey in an area contested by Greece. Its research vessel will stay in the port of Antalya for now, giving the two countries time to seek a diplomatic solution. And the Trump administration's decision to withdraw nearly 12,000 troops from Germany has come under bipartisan attack in the Senate amid warnings it would disrupt U.S. alliances. There has likely been a slight increase in the number of people in England testing positive for COVID-19 and in the overall incidence of infections in recent weeks. The weekly infection survey said an estimated 1 in 1,500 individuals had COVID-19 in the most recent week. Britain's Health Secretary defended the government's abrupt reimposition of restrictions on social life across a swath of northern England, saying it was important to clamp down quickly on new outbreaks of COVID-19. Iceland wants to protect the Arctic from rising global tensions between the United States and China, according to the Icelandic Prime Minister. Her comments followed a trip to Denmark last week by U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, during which he criticized China for designating itself a near-Arctic nation. You're listening to the World News on Radio Caravan. And Vietnam today reported its first-ever death of a person with the coronavirus as it struggles with a renewed outbreak after 99 days with no local cases. In this news out of Hanoi. Former Taiwanese President Lee Tang-hui, considered the father of Taiwan's democracy, has died at the age of 97. He served as president of Taiwan from 1988 to the year 2000. And Hong Kong leader Carrie Lam announced today that the government will postpone highly anticipated legislative elections by a year, citing a worsening coronavirus outbreak in the semi-autonomous Chinese city. Hong Kong's government's decision to disqualify 12 opposition pro-democracy figures from running in elections has been internationally condemned. The United States is considering measures to allow Hong Kongers to settle in the U.S. following Beijing's imposition of its sweeping national security law over the city. And Joe Biden supporters announced a launch of an outreach to the influential Indian Americans in the United States in 14 languages, reflecting the linguistic diversity of an ethnic community which is being sought after by both Democrats and Republicans in key battleground states. Delhi Police Commissioner issued an order prohibiting the flying of subconventional aerial platforms like UAVs, paragliders and hot air balloons in the national capital till the 15th of August, citing security reasons. And more than 54,000 fresh COVID-19 cases and 786 fatalities were reported from across the country yesterday, both highest in a single day so far, even as the overall death count from the pandemic crossed 35,000, with more than 5,000 being reported in the last 7 days. India has managed to treat and discharge more than 1 million people who had taken ill due to the coronavirus disease, and this silver lining comes against the backdrop of COVID-19 cases continuing to surge in various parts of India and daily caseloads now crossing that 50,000 mark. The proposed Ram temple in Ayodhya will be almost double the size of what was originally planned, as its design was modified following the Supreme Court verdict last year. The Grand Ram Mandir, coming up at the Ram Janmabhoomi in Ayodhya, will now have 5 domed mandaps and 1 shikhar, making the temple a whopping 161 feet high. And the preparation of 111,000 laddus is underway at the Mani Ramdas Chowni in Ayodhya by the Devraha Hans Baba Sansthan, ahead of the foundation stone laying ceremony of the Ram temple in the city on the 5th of August by Prime Minister Modi. India is celebrating 25 years of mobility today. The 31st of July marks the day the first mobile call was made in India, and this took place in 1995, and the call was made by then West Bengal Chief Minister Jyoti Basu, the first mobile call in India made using Nokia handsets. The civic body in Bhiwandi city of Maharashtra has urged citizens to celebrate Bakra Eid at their homes and not assemble in public places, especially mosques, to prevent the spread of the coronavirus. Muslims across Asia taking precautions against the novel coronavirus, such as wearing face masks and temperature checks, performed prayers today to mark the festival of Eid al-Azha in mosques with reduced capacity as well as on the streets. After Islamabad granted permission to British Airways, the company announced that it would resume its UK-Pakistan flight operations next month. And Saudi Arabia has sought verification of the credentials of 33 Pakistani pilots and 8 technical experts working in that country. At least 3 people, including a woman, were killed and over 20 injured in a clash between an unruly mob and security forces at Friendship Gate border crossing in Chaman, while a heavy exchange of fire also took place between Pakistani and Afghan security forces. The number of confirmed cases in Pakistan today stands at 277,807 and the deaths at 5,931. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is all that I have in the news for you on this last day of July. Eid Mubarak to all of you from Radio Caravan.